What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the video. So we're gonna have a little story time here, and it's gonna be about my experiences with the 450L. I'm sure a lot of people are gonna be triggered by this, and that's okay. Let's get right into it. So flashing back about a decade ago, I was just getting out of high school and I wanted to start getting back into riding. I had a sport bike at the time that I never rode, and I knew ultimately that I would get into some trouble on, so that needed to go. Unfortunately, I couldn't get rid of it fast enough. Story on that later. But I was always fortunate enough to have dirt bikes growing up, so I was always riding. But when I got older, I didn't have any friends that rode, so you are who you hang around with. I lost interest in riding, but after all of the bullshit that you deal with in school was done, I got back into my own interest and wanted to ride again. Started out with a YZ125, ended up getting rid of that, bought a KLX 110 just to mob around on and have some fun. I'd always wanted a pit bike growing up, so that was a bucket list thing. No regrets there. The 110L was an absolute blast. Fast forward a little bit, I wanted something bigger that I could ride on the street, so I started looking at dual sports. I stumbled across a channel called Accidental Broadcast, and he was a guy in Hawaii that rode a WR250R, and man, did he sell me on that bike. Now, I didn't know a whole lot about motorcycles at the time, and I was always curious as to why they did not have a street legal 450. KTM, Husqvarna, they all had them, but why across the pond did they not? The more I dug into it, the more that I learned about emissions restrictions and why bikes like the DRZ400, the XR650L still exist to this day. Those bikes are grandfathered in, so they literally can't be changed because they wouldn't pass today's emission standards. That's why we've only seen graphic changes for the past 20 plus years for those bikes. And there's others like that. You still have the TW200, the XT, etc. So after all that research, the hopes of getting a street legal 450 was just non-existent. So I ended up settling for the WR250R. I was super excited about it. Accidental Broadcast sold me on the Athena kit. If I ever wanted a little bit more power, just throw a new jug and piston on. But long story short, that never happened, and that goes back to the sport bike incident. So subscribe down below if you want to hear that. It's a pretty good story. So that incident happened, more years went by. I had gotten a pit bike to play around on, met a Lexus, ended up buying a KX250, so if you see the theme here, I stuck in the dirt for a while. The KX250 was fun, it just wasn't practical. Ended up blowing that up. Got another 110 so Alexis could learn to ride. And after rebuilding the KX250, I wanted to get rid of that because there was no purpose. I did not race motocross and it was the least trail-friendly bike, which I wanted to get into. So I ended up getting a trade offer for a DRZ 400S, but for some reason I turned it down and I ended up not even selling the KX. And I ended up not even... You, dude! God damn! Years went by, and I ended up buying a Honda Grom. A lot of that was fueled by the content that I was watching, Fooligan, Photogrammer. They just made those bikes look so fun, and after what had happened, I just wanted something with a little bit of power that I could go play around on, learn how to wheelie. I was kind of obsessed with wheelies at the time. I think Lee Stewart is the one that fueled that. So that's when me, my mom, my dad, and my girlfriend, we all went and bought 2018 Honda Groms. And no regrets there by any means. Those bikes were so fun. I still have it sitting next to me over there. I learned a lot on that bike, and there's a phrase that I love. It's more fun to ride a slow bike fast than a fast bike slow. A lot of those sport bikes, at least on the street, unless you want to go to jail, you're not really ringing those things out. Versus the Grom, you can ring that thing out all the time, and they're a blast just to rip around on. But moving forward, I still had that itch to ride off-road. I wanted a dual sport. I had rode my Grom off-road quite a bit, but the suspension is terrible. It's just not practical, and I actually wanted to do some riding, so I came across another fantastic deal and bought my CRF450RL. That bike definitely needs an honorable mention because that was a huge factor in growing my channel. So many good memories on that bike. Still have it to this day. I love that machine. I did a lot of riding on that bike that not a lot of people were used to seeing. So that really grew my name and kind of gave me respect in that world. I was riding that thing like an enduro bike and I was having a blast doing it. So another couple years of that, I progressed a lot in riding and the bike eventually started limiting me. So fast forward to May of 2018, those dreams that I had as a little boy getting out of high school, wanting a street legal 450 finally came true. Honda announced the CRF450L. And man, let me tell you, I was ecstatic. I was like a kid on Christmas. In the eyes of the dual sport community, this was going to be a bike that literally did it all. from the trails to the street. What was going to be the excuse now? Before, it was the lack of power, the weight, and Honda was pretty good with marketing. They really made it seem like you were going to get a motocross bike with a plate, and millions of riders were automatically sold. For those that weren't into the Euro market and wanted something that was tried, true, reliable, had that Japanese stamp on there, the 450L was the answer, and I was sold as well. Until I saw the price tag. So as soon as I saw that MSRP at $10,000, I knew that it just wasn't going to be practical. I did not have that kind of money at the time. And that's just the sticker price. Once you get it out the door with dealer fees, tax, title, you're looking at 12 grand. And I could buy a lot of things for $12,000, and a 450cc detuned street legal dirt bike just wasn't one of them. So September of 2018, the bike was released. I really didn't watch too much content about it, as I just didn't want to get myself down because I still really wanted that bike. So I just kept doing my own thing, riding the 250L, having a good time. 2 years passed. In September of 2020, I started seeing some used models pop up. I was finding them well under MSRP, and I ended up finding one in a neighboring state for a really good price that I couldn't pass up. So we loaded up my grandpa's truck. Alexis and I headed to Morgantown, West Virginia to pick up my new-to-me CRF450L. I didn't even have reliable transportation at the time. That's how bad I wanted this freaking bike. When I say it was my dream bike, I am not kidding. Like, this was everything that I'd ever hoped for. I thought this was gonna be a bike that I would have forever, ride it, rebuild it. So I was super ecstatic, went, paid cash, got the 450L, brought it back home. But during that time, I was in the process of remodeling my shop, my garage. I had nowhere to really store the bike at the time, and this was a main priority for filming, for working on stuff. So this took all of my time, and the bike literally sat in the basement for 3, 4, 5 months. I don't remember, to be honest, but it was a long time. And I'd already uploaded the video of me buying it, so I was just getting bombarded with questions about the bike, which was just driving me crazy because I really wanted to ride it. But I had priorities. I finished the shop. I had somewhere to store it. So in May of 2020, I dusted off the red beast, threw on my gum boots, and strapped on my GoPro for my first initial ride and review. The bike felt absolutely amazing. It had so much more power than the 250L. The suspension was fantastic. I took it over a couple jumps right away. Where I live is pretty flat, so I was just flying around the open fields and really just feeling how much power that bike had. And even in the stock form, it was plenty of power. So I wasn't gonna waste any time. I like the slow, technical riding, so I dropped down into the creek bed where I've tested some bikes in the past. And this is where things started to get rough.
I definitely feel like I'm going faster on the 450L. Woo, it's deep. And we stalled it.
The bike was really hard to keep running at low speeds. I was slowing down to navigate through a few wet rocks. I rolled on the throttle really quick to stabilize myself, and pop!
That ain't no good.
My first flame out happened. And I had never had a big bore 4-stroke before. I'd always rode 2-strokes growing up. So at first I was kind of confused. I didn't know what was going on.
Try to turn that up a little bit, just tighten the throttle tube.
I didn't know if it was warmed up all the way. I didn't know if it was acting up because it sat for so long. But no, it wasn't just an isolated incident. Throughout the next 100 yards of riding through that creek, I think I flamed the bike out like 3 times.
Woo, it's deep. And we stalled it. God, this thing's pissing me off. Damn.
Now I know what a lot of you are saying, why the hell would you buy a 450 if you liked slow technical riding? Well, back to my initial point, I wanted a bike that I could do it all. I wanted a bike that I could take from the trails to the street. I wanted to have good suspension. So I knew it wouldn't be the best at the low speed stuff, but I thought I could at least get by. And boy, was I disappointed.
Fan kicked on. I'm struggling a little bit, guys. Stalling a lot.
That was a pretty depressing ride back to the shop. As soon as I got back, I hopped on the internet right away, turned up the idle, tried that, and I fully expected the 450 to be choked up from the factory. They have to get past the emissions regulations. The 250L is even choked up, but with an airbox mod and an EJK, that's all you really needed for the 250L. Also, let's talk about the clutch pull. A $12,000 bike does not come standard with a hydraulic clutch.
Bruh.
I'd like to think that I wouldn't have been as frustrated with a hydraulic clutch, but I still don't think that would have stopped the flame out. So on top of the flame out, the bike's weight was really starting to show. The 450L weighs a good 45 pounds plus over the 450R. I mean, that's only 20 pounds less than my 250L with a freaking street bike engine. So that's another thing that I was disappointed with. It felt heavy, but that's another thing that I thought I could deal with. Like, I had no problem with the weight of the 250L. I fully accepted it, but it didn't feel 20 pounds lighter than the 250L. But I wasn't ready to give up yet, so I hit the internet, hit the forums, and sure enough, a lot of people were having this issue, and it all came down to one item that you had to get to really bring the bike to life, and that is the Vortex ECU. This was like an $800 piece of plastic, and that's just the ECU. You really need a full exhaust system to let it breathe, and if you know the price of exhaust systems, they're not cheap. So the only solution was to spend more money, and at this point I'd already added another $500 in protection items, so the last thing I wanted to do was throw away another $2,000 just to get my bike to run properly. No. I mean, think about it. If you're buying one brand new, you're spending $12,000 out the door. Yes, I know you can get better deals here and there, but I'm saying worst case scenario, you're spending $12,000 out the door. You have to spend close to $2,000 just to get it to run properly, and you still have a bone stock bike with stock tires that are worthless that you're gonna snap levers as soon as you lay it down on the trails. So you add bark busters, a decent skid plate, radiator guards. Realistically, it wouldn't be that hard to get up to $15,000. So $15,000 for a dual sport that feels like you have your nephew on the back. Nope, not for me. I sold it within a couple months after riding it. I did a few trail rides with it, and my opinions just further worsened. The stupid things hold their value so well that I got all of my money back, and I ended up on Team Orange. That was ultimately the best decision that I'd ever made, and at the end of the day, guys, it really just comes down to where and how you're going to be riding. For me, at that point, I was going to be spending most of my time on the trails anyway, and like I said, I like the slow speed, the technical rides, the enduro stuff, which I was able to do all of that on the 450L. Don't get me wrong, you can do it, it's just not the bike for the job. There's never going to be a one do-it-all machine. It just doesn't exist. So that was the biggest lesson in owning the 450L. The better option is just to own multiple bikes. Buy a bike that's built for the task that you want to do. It seems pretty obvious, but a lot of us out there still want that one bike that will do it all, but I promise you it does not exist. You can do it all, but it's not going to be good at everything. And the 450L was just that. You could do everything, but it was also mediocre at everything. I still appreciate what Honda brought to the table, and that can only further competition within the market, and I hope the evolution of the 450cc dual sports just gets better. But whenever you're looking for a bike, if you have the opportunity to ride it, before you buy it, I highly suggest doing so. But who knows, I can sit here and say all of this, but I might end up with another one someday. I found one for $6,000 and I contemplated buying it, doing the Vortex, the pipe, and just getting a second opinion, so who knows, we might end up doing that someday. But that's just it, a lot of my arguments were based on price. So for $6,000, you're getting a hell of a bike for the money. And it's a bike that would be great for a lot of people, but just wasn't for me. So for now, having multiple bikes is the answer. I just picked up this beauty in the back. I'll have a video on that soon of why you might want to buy the 300L over the 450RL. But that's going to end my rant on the big red money pit. I hope y'all enjoyed. If you'd like to see more videos like this, flies, man. If you'd like to see more videos like this, drop a comment down below, hit the like button, it really helps out the channel. Subscribe for future content, and until the next video, adventure daily, and we'll see you then.